there, welcome to my channel, String Things by Mel. My name is Mel. I'm a stay-at-home mom living in Vancouver, Canada, and on this channel I chat and share everything about my knitting hobby. Today I wanted to share some thoughts and a little discussion I've been having with me, myself, and I this past month about project cost. So I was recently updating a few projects in my notebook, needle size, yarn amount used, for example. And it suddenly struck me that I've never listed the cost of the yarn for any given project. And I've also been getting more people asking me the question, oh, how much did it cost to make that sweater? And for whatever reason, I have not retained in my memory yarn costs. However, ask me a project maybe 3 years ago and I could tell you the exact brand and name of the yarn, the colorway, for any given project really. But cost of yarn, no, couldn't tell you. And it made me start thinking about why haven't I been noting it in my book? And it's not like it's something I'm ashamed to say or that I'm hiding it. I'm pretty transparent with my husband about how much yarn costs, and especially since becoming a stay-at-home mom, I make no financial contribution to the family. I quit my job last March, and so I have no income. So I am pretty fortunate to be at home with my daughter and still have room in the family budget to continue this hobby and purchase yarn for this hobby. However, just because I'm allowed to buy yarn, I don't want to be irresponsible about it. So I thought moving forward, I would start keeping track of how much my projects cost, just the yarn itself, and see where I end up at the end of the year. The reason I'm sharing these thoughts with you guys is because, well, a little bit more for entertainment purposes, and don't worry, I'm not going to sit here complaining about the cost of yarn, nor am I going to be bragging about it. But I wanted to put it to you guys and ask you if it's something you keep track of, or is it something that you purchase the yarn and then just never think about it again. So along with telling you the actual costs of 3 examples I have today, I'm also gonna discuss all the thoughts surrounding the cost of these 3 projects. So before I jump in, some admin things. All the prices I'm sharing are going to be in Canadian dollars because I am in Canada, that's my currency. Even if I purchased yarn from another country, I've converted it to my home currency. I am not going to include any taxes and shipping costs, just to keep things simple. And in terms of the number of skeins used for a project, so for example, if a project used 4.5 skeins, I've rounded up to 5 for the project cost because you can't buy partial skeins. And because I want to be as concise as possible for this video, I won't be discussing overall experience or what I think about patterns. It won't be any sort of review in that sense. I'm going to keep my discussion to thoughts around project cost. So I may not directly say the name of the designer or the pattern, but I'll put everything up on the screen and or the description box for this video. Okay, so the first project I wanted to share with you guys just happens to be my most expensive project to date, and it was a lot more expensive than I thought. So my first project is something that is 100% made from locally hand-dyed yarn, all of which I purchased at Knit City, Vancouver last year, and it's my Chantilly Cardigan. So I decided to include this one because, well, there's a number of things that I think contribute to the cost, but there's also another kind of value about it that I wanted to discuss with you guys. So just before going to Knit City last year, the Chantilly Cardigan pattern was released, and I made it my goal to find and purchase all the yarn required at Knit City. So what was really great about the experience of buying this yarn, and what I find super invaluable, is that going to yarn festivals like Knit City is that you get to see so many different kinds of yarns, and if you're particular about color, you get to see them in person, and you also get to compare from different vendors. So you may go to a shop, but some shops are limited and they don't have all the colorways for all the different brands. Yarns festival like this really just, at first it can seem overwhelming, but then since I only had kind of one goal, one garment I was shopping for, I was really able to kind of hone in and kind of look from afar, like, oh, I see some sage green there, I'm gonna go look at it there. So I found that a really invaluable experience for shopping for this yarn. Another great thing that I love about this cardigan is that the hand-dyed yarn is local to me. Isis Fibre Arts and Bramble Ridge are both yarn companies here in BC, and I got to meet both of these lovely women in person. So meeting the woman who hand dyed this yarn also adds to kind of sentimental value for this cardigan. I can look back and I can say, like, I met these people and this yarn is local and I bought it in person, you know, after a pandemic kind of thing. So yeah, so experience wise, good vibes, all of them really stack up. So okay, let's just jump into the cost. You guys are like, yeah, okay, can you just tell me how much you spent? So 6 skeins of fingering weight yarn from Isis Fibre Arts at cost of $30 each, and 3 skeins of the brushed Suri alpaca lace from Bramble Ridge at $32 each, adds up to a total of $276. Yeah, when I went to Knit City, I had an initial budget of about $200 to spend. That is what I was comfortable with at the time. But if you haven't been following along, I lost yarn chicken in terms of the fingering weight yarn. So I ended up having to buy, I think, 2 more skeins than I had originally planned for. Yeah, I still think about that number, and I'm just like, look at the cardigan, it's behind me right now, and wow, I spent almost $300 on materials for that. But as I said, sentimental value, the experience of going to my first yarn festival, for me, for this particular cardigan, you know, that kind of outweighs the cost. And it's a really special design. I think it's relatively unique. It's not like any kind of cardigan out there or anything else that I've made. So yeah, the cost hurts, you know, when I first made the calculation, look at the total, yeah. Do I regret it? No, because I had a lot of fun finding the yarn, and the experience of knitting with it was amazing. So let's get into maybe some higher price contribution factors that I was thinking about. So 1, hand-dyed yarn. Yes, hand-dyed yarn can be expensive, but I also don't want to scare off anyone who wants to purchase hand-dyed yarn. Why this particular cardigan comes at kind of a higher price is that it's made up with holding 3 strands at a time. So you could save and buy just 1 DK weight strand to hold with the Suri or a mohair. But since I went as the original pattern suggestion of holding 2 strands of fingering together, it's almost like buying 2 cardigans worth of yarn of fingering. Yeah, so that kind of, you know, that I don't want to say doubles the cost, but it certainly adds up to the total cost for your project. And the pattern does say that you can hold a single strand of DK as well, as long as you meet gauge, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I really wanted to find fingering weight yarn and follow the pattern. The other thing that adds to the higher cost is the amount of yarn that I actually used. So I mentioned that I'm including whole skein costs for all the projects that I'm sharing. So with respect to the Suri strand, so I bought 3 skeins, 50 grams each, and I actually only used 108 grams total. So I have 42 grams left of the 30 of the third skein, and that's a lot. So had I knit a smaller size, I may not have needed that third skein and may not need to have spent that $32. So, you know, that would bring down the cost a little bit too. The fingering weight yarn, I really did like use everything. I have like just like tiny little ball left over. I'm not even sure what I'm gonna do with it. It's definitely kind of in my scraps bag, because I'm not gonna throw it out, obviously. It's not small enough to just toss out, which is just kind of terrible to say, but it's just enough to keep maybe for a colorware project, for example. So those are kind of the thoughts I had around that came about after doing this Chantilly cardigan. So hand-dyed yarn, yes, contributed to the price. The amount of actual yarn used, so almost not needing a third skein of Suri, you know, that could have brought the price down. And also the number of strands used in a project. So those are some things that you can consider if you're about to tackle any sort of given project. Those are areas you can look at about, you know, reducing yarn cost if you're someone who is on a budget. The next project I wanted to chat about is my Marseille Sweater. So this is something I finished in January of this year, and it's, I don't want to say basic, but it's a simple black and white striped sweater. And this was one of those things that I felt like it wasn't worth it to spend a lot of money on. So I definitely wanted to keep the cost low for this one. So the pattern yarn, or the suggested yarn for the Marseille Sweater is Sandnesgarn Double Sunday. And for me to buy that here locally, it's just too expensive, considering how much yarn is needed for this sweater. So for my size, it's the smallest size, 600 grams total is required to make this sweater. And to buy that locally, Double Sunday goes for about $11 to $12, and each skein is about 50 grams. So 12 of those means I'm looking at $144 for material cost. And for this somewhat simple design sweater, just could not justify spending that much on this. So started looking for yarn substitutions, and I decided to go with Drops Lima. Is that my cat? False alarm, cat's okay. So I decided to go with Drops Lima. It's generally known to be a more economical choice, especially compared to Sandnesgarn. And Wool Warehouse happened to have Drops Lima on sale, so I thought, perfect. So I bought it from Wool Warehouse at the cost of $2 a skein. So 12 balls, $24 to knit up this sweater. Like, on the opposite spectrum of the Chantilly, it was like, Chantilly was like, wow, that's a lot. And how Marseille is like, oh, you only spend $24? So yeah, I'm not just bringing this up because just to say like, buy yarn on sale, you will save lots. But also a bit of a lesson in correct yarn estimates for a pattern. So the pattern is correct. in my case anyways. So it said 600 grams or 12 balls of yarn. I indeed used 12 balls of yarn. However, for whatever strange reason, and a reason that I have absolutely no recollection of my reasoning behind, I purchased 17 balls of drops Lima. Maybe I was planning to make a version for Darcy as well. I don't know. But given that the yarn was $2 a skein, I'm not crying about, the overage there. It's $10 extra. So really I spent $34 for this project. But it got me thinking about, had I not made a yarn substitution and had I actually purchased double Sunday yarn, I would have had $60 worth of extra yarn. An extra yarn that I couldn't use to make myself another garment, for example. Because yeah, that's not enough to make another sweater for me, enough to make one for Darcy, but what I'm trying to say is that if you get it wrong about how much yarn to buy, or if the pattern is totally wrong, yeah, you take a hit in the wallet for that. And for someone who makes no money, it's a hit in my husband's wallet. So, I mean, I'm really happy that I did buy the yarn on sale, so I didn't really lose out. But has it ever happened to you that you just, for whatever reason, bought way too much yarn? And obviously, you can return yarn, but by the time I actually sat down and used this yarn, like months had gone by. So definitely past any sort of return policy. And for my case, to ship it back to the UK, I just wouldn't have been worth it. As a comparison, if Wool Warehouse wasn't having a sale on Drops Lima, yes, I could have bought this yarn locally. I can buy this yarn for about $6 to $7 a skein, so I would have been spending almost $80 on this project, and even at that price, I wouldn't have knit the sweater. just not worth it in my case, in my mind, or just not worth it in my opinion. So again, that's my opinion. You may think it's worth it to spend that much money to make a sweater. Obviously, I am not afraid to, buy expensive yarn or have high project costs because of my Chantilly cardigan example. But again, for this one, I couldn't justify that cost. My last example is my must-have cardigan. This is something, did I finish it last year? 2022? I think I did, yes I did. This one is an all-over cable knit bottom up in pieces, and I used Briggs Little Regal yarn. Briggs Little is a yarn company on the east coast of Canada, and they actually have their own mill here in Canada. So I used 6 skeins. Was it 6? No. I used 5 skeins of yarn, and they were $6 each. So this project cost $30 to make, and that's not on sale. That is the regular price. And I was thinking, why is this yarn so inexpensive? Because each skein is about 4 ounces, quarter pound, and I think it was over 200 meters per skein, so like a solid amount of yarn. And so this is an example of what happens when you buy yarn that is local to you. And I don't mean just the company, the person is from your country or your province or whatever, but the yarn itself is from Canada. So Briggs Little uses domestic wool, and they also have their own mill here in Canada. So there's no extra shipping costs worked into the cost of the yarn. So for example, let's say Cascade. Um, a lot of their yarn is Peruvian wool, and let's say the sheep are actually located in Peru. So the yarn would have to travel from Peru to wherever processing or the mill is, and then, from the mill transfer to where it needs to be stored in a warehouse, for example. Um, that doesn't happen with Briggs Little. It's kind of the wool arrives at the mill and then everything just kind of stays there and is stored there. So that is how yarn price can seem a little lower in comparison to other yarns. Also, this yarn definitely can be referred to as rustic. You can find bits of vegetable matter or hay, whatever you want to call it, within the yarn. And that's just as a result of less processing, less cleaning. So, which is less labor, less time through all the machinery, which means lower cost that way. Less labor, less handling, that is another factor that can reduce the cost of the yarn. So I guess my thoughts around this project was that if you can buy yarn that's, sourced within your own country and also milled in or sent to a mill in your country, that is going to help you find some yarn at a lower price point as well. There's obviously going to be exceptions to that. Sheep breed, for example, is going to be one of them. Some sheep breeds are more expensive than the other. I cannot tell you what sheep breed is used by Briggs Little. No idea. But yeah, just another factor to keep in mind when buying yarn. Thanks so much for hanging out with me, letting me ramble about project cost. Does, going back and looking how much my projects cost, is that going to change any of my spending habits or behavior moving forward? I don't know. I'm going to see what it kind of adds up to at the end of this year. Perhaps if you're interested, would you like me to share the grand total at the end of the year? Is this something, would you like to hear project cost in my podcast episodes? Or is talking about money uncomfortable for you? Let me know in the comments. At this point, project cost is going to be a data point I'm going to include in my project notebook. What I'm going to do with it, I guess it's going to depend on how big that number is at the end of the year. I like to think that I'm being somewhat responsible with each purchase that I am making. My goal this year has been to purchase yarn with a specific project or pattern that I'm going to use in mind, and to buy yarn when I need it, meaning buy it when I know I'm going to use it within the next couple of months. So that's more of the spending goal I'm working on right now. And then, as I said, we'll see at the end of the year how much I've spent. At the end of the day, the message I want to leave with you guys is that this is something I just was thinking about the past few weeks. Again, don't know if it's going to change any of my spending habits, but I want you guys to spend what's comfortable for you. Buy yarn that you like, and if you don't have to make any compromises, don't. But also looking for sales and having a budget on some projects can be fun. Finding the right kind of yarn can turn into some creative research project. Regardless of how much I've spent on my projects, I love them all the same. I feel like I'm finally honing in on knitting up garments that I wear, multiple times a week even. And so at this point for me, project cost isn't playing a huge factor in my enjoyment of knitting, my enjoyment of wearing my garments. So spend what you can, spend what's comfortable. And thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. So until next time, happy knitting. Bye.